Every year, millions of photographs are taken of Mount Rushmore, 4 enormous faces carved into granite: George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Theodore Roosevelt, Abraham Lincoln. It is one of the most recognizable monuments in the United States, but almost every photograph is taken from the same direction, from below, facing the presidents, and that means most visitors never see what lies behind them, because hidden in a narrow canyon behind the famous faces is an entrance cut directly into the mountain, a doorway leading into darkness, a tunnel blasted deep into solid granite. It is closed to tourists. There are no public tours, and inside, beneath a massive stone marker, sits a sealed vault intended to survive for generations. Online, it has been described as everything from a secret government bunker to an underground archive, to evidence that Mount Rushmore was designed to hide something much larger. Some claim there are additional tunnels. Others believe classified documents were placed inside, and the most extreme theories suggest the monument itself may have been only the visible part of a far more ambitious project. But there is a problem with the phrase secret chamber, because the chamber is real, and the government does talk about it. The National Park Service even documents its history. So the true mystery is not whether the chamber exists. The real mystery is why it was built, why Congress suddenly ordered work on it to stop, why it remained unfinished for decades, and why, more than half a century later, officials returned to the mountain and placed a sealed repository inside. Tonight, we are going behind the 4 faces of Mount Rushmore into the unfinished Hall of Records. And by the end of this documentary, the strangest part of the story may not be the conspiracy theories. It may be the original purpose of the chamber itself, because it was designed for people who may not exist for thousands of years. If you enjoy documentaries about hidden places, abandoned projects, conspiracy theories, government secrets, and disturbing pieces of history, subscribe to the channel. And tell us in the comments before we begin, what do you think should be hidden inside a chamber built into Mount Rushmore? Now, let's go behind the monument. Mount Rushmore rises from the Black Hills of South Dakota, but long before 4 presidents were carved into the granite, the Black Hills already had a history far older and more complicated than the monument itself. The region is known to the Lakota as Pahasapa and carries deep cultural and spiritual importance. Under the Treaty of Fort Laramie in 1868, the United States recognized the Black Hills as Lakota territory. After gold was discovered in the region in the 1870s, miners entered the area, conflict intensified, and the United States eventually took control of the Black Hills. That history remains deeply contested. Mount Rushmore would later be created in the middle of this landscape, turning the mountain into a national symbol for many Americans, while remaining a symbol of loss and broken agreements for others. The idea for a massive monument in the Black Hills emerged during the 1920s. Sculptor Gutzon Borglum eventually took control of the artistic vision. Work began in 1927. For approximately 14 years, nearly 400 workers helped carve the mountain. Much of the material was removed using dynamite. Workers were suspended from the granite face on cables and chairs hundreds of feet above the ground. And despite the obvious danger, the National Park Service records that no workers died during the actual carving project. But Borglum did not simply want 4 giant faces. His vision was much larger. He wanted the mountain to tell a story, a permanent story, something that would explain America to future generations. And this is where the hidden chamber begins. Borglum understood a strange problem. Imagine the monument survives for thousands of years. Cities disappear, languages change, political borders vanish, documents are lost, civilizations rise and collapse, and one day, people discover 4 enormous human faces carved into a mountain. Who are they? Why are they there? Who built them? Without an explanation, Mount Mount Rushmore could eventually become an archaeological mystery, a structure with no context. Borglum did not want that to happen. His first solution was enormous. Literally, he wanted to carve a gigantic historical inscription directly into the mountain. The inscription would describe important events in the history of the United States. The planned text was enormous, roughly 80 feet by 120 feet, but the idea had problems. The words would have been extremely difficult to read from far below, and changes to the position of the presidential figures interfered with the space originally intended for the inscription. So Borglum developed another idea. Instead of putting the story on the outside of the mountain, he would put it inside. He proposed a huge chamber cut into the granite behind the presidential faces. The name was dramatic, the Hall of Records, and Borglum's plans were far more elaborate than the unfinished tunnel visitors never see today. He envisioned a room approximately 80 feet wide and 100 feet long. An enormous granite staircase, around 800 feet in length, would climb toward the chamber. Visitors would eventually approach a massive entrance. The doorway was planned to be around 20 feet high and 14 feet wide. Above it would be a bronze eagle with a wingspan of approximately 38 feet, and carved above the entrance would be words announcing the purpose of the place: America's onward march, the Hall of Records. Inside, Borglum envisioned something that almost sounds like a temple: bronze and glass cabinets, busts of important Americans, records describing American achievements, historical documents, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the story of why Mount Rushmore had been created. It was not supposed to be a military bunker. It was not officially designed as a government command center. It was supposed to be an archive built into the mountain itself, a message carved in stone for the distant future. And then the blasting began. In July of 1938, workers started cutting into the granite. Drills entered the mountain. Explosives shattered the rock. Slowly, a tunnel appeared in the canyon behind the presidential faces. Imagine standing there during construction. The public sees the famous monument developing on one side, but behind it, hidden from normal view, workers are blasting a passage directly into the mountain. The tunnel grew deeper, 10 feet, 20, 30. Eventually, approximately 70 feet of granite had been removed, but the grand chamber never appeared, because in 1939, the work stopped. Congress directed that federal money should be used to complete the presidential faces, rather than Borglum's Hall of Records. The tunnel was abandoned in its unfinished state. No great glass doors, no enormous bronze eagle, no giant stairway, no vast archive chamber, just a rough passage drilled into the granite, narrowing toward the back, silent, empty, and unfinished. This is the moment that would later become perfect material for conspiracy theories. A government-funded monument, a hidden tunnel, construction ordered to stop, a location inaccessible to ordinary visitors, and an unfinished chamber sitting behind 4 American presidents. Put those facts together without context, and the story begins to sound very different. Why did Congress really stop it? Was money the only reason? Was something discovered inside the mountain? Were additional sections completed and never revealed? Did the tunnel connect to another facility? There is no credible evidence establishing any of these claims. The historical record gives a much less dramatic explanation. Money was limited. Congress wanted the sculpture completed. Borglum's plans were constantly expanding, and the Hall of Records was not considered essential to finishing the monument. But conspiracy theories rarely grow from what can be seen. They grow in the empty spaces, and the Hall of Records contains a very large empty space. Then, something happened that made the story even stranger. Gutzon Borglum died in March 1941. His son Lincoln continued overseeing the work, but with funding problems and the United States moving closer to involvement in World War II, the project came to an end. On October 31, 1941, Mount Rushmore was declared complete, except it wasn't complete, not according to Borglum's original vision. The presidents remained, the Hall of Records remained unfinished, and the rough tunnel behind them sat largely unchanged for decades. Tourists continued arriving, photographs were taken, postcards were sold. Mount Rushmore became one of the most famous images in America, but almost nobody visiting from below could see the abandoned passage behind the faces. For more than 50 years, Borglum's planned archive remained an unrealized dream. And then, in 1998, people returned to the chamber. Not conspiracy theorists, not trespassers, officials and members of Borglum's family. On August 9, 1998, a repository was installed at the entrance area of the Hall of Records. A hole had been prepared in the floor. Inside it went a teakwood box. The box was protected inside a titanium vault, and above that vault, a granite capstone. Inside were 16 porcelain enamel panels. They contained information explaining Mount Rushmore, why it was built, who created it, why the 4 presidents were selected, and a brief history of the United States. The National Park Service says the repository was designed as a record for people thousands of years in the future who might discover the monument and wonder why it existed, and visitors today cannot access it. Think about that for a moment. There is a titanium vault inside Mount Rushmore, protected by granite, containing a message intended for people living thousands of years from now. That statement sounds like something from a conspiracy documentary, but that part is real, and perhaps that is why the myths are so difficult to kill. The reality is already unusual enough. Now consider the location. The chamber is often described online as being under Mount Rushmore. Technically, that is misleading. It is not directly underneath the presidential faces, like a basement hidden below them. The entrance is located in a small canyon behind the carved figures, across from them, cut into the north wall of the granite. That difference matters, because internet illustrations often transform a rough 70-foot tunnel into an enormous underground complex. Secret elevators, multiple levels, military rooms, escape tunnels, archives filled with classified documents. None of those features are established by the historical evidence. The official chamber is much simpler, a rough, unfinished tunnel and a sealed repository. But there is still an uncomfortable question. Why can't tourists simply visit it? The answer does not require a government conspiracy. The hall is located high on the mountain in difficult terrain and was never completed as a public visitor space. The elaborate access staircase Borglum imagined was never constructed. A location blasted into granite in the 1930s without a finished tourist route is very different from a modern museum hallway. Restricted access may feel secretive, but inaccessible does not automatically mean classified. And this is one of the most important distinctions in the entire story. There is a difference between something the public cannot physically enter and something the government refuses to acknowledge. The Hall of Records is not officially denied. The National Park Service publishes photographs. It publishes architectural drawings. It explains why construction stopped. It describes the 1998 repository. It even explains what is written on the panels. So why does the secret room story survive? Because Mount Rushmore is almost perfectly designed for mystery. 4 massive faces, a remote granite mountain, explosives used during construction, an inaccessible canyon, an abandoned tunnel, a sealed titanium container, an architect with ambitions larger than the completed monument, and a project interrupted before his vision could be finished. Those ingredients invite people to imagine what might be missing from the official story. Some online theories claim the Hall of Records is only the beginning of a larger network. There is no reliable evidence confirming such a network. Others suggest the chamber contains classified government files. Again, the documented repository contains historical panels, not a known collection collection of secret intelligence documents. Another theory imagines the chamber as an emergency shelter for senior government officials. But Borglum's surviving plans describe an archive and historical shrine, not a continuity of government bunker. The conspiracy version becomes dramatic only when we replace documented history with speculation. But perhaps the documented history contains something more interesting than a fictional bunker. Borglum was trying to control how the future would remember the past. He did not only want to carve faces, he wanted to leave an explanation, a selected version of history designed to outlive books, governments, and perhaps even the United States itself. That raises a deeper question. Who gets to decide what is preserved? Which events? Which leaders? Which version of a nation's history? The 4 presidents on Mount Rushmore were chosen to represent major themes in the development of the United States. But the mountain itself stands in the Black Hills, land with a history inseparable from native nations, federal treaties, conflict, and dispossession. A future civilization discovering only Borglum's archive might understand one story of the mountain. Would it understand all of them? That may be the most fascinating hidden layer of Mount Rushmore. Not a secret military facility, but the tension between monument, memory, and history. The Hall of Records was meant to explain the monument to the future, but every historical monument reflects decisions about what should be remembered and what may be left outside the frame. There is something almost eerie about the repository for another reason. It was not primarily created for us. The National Park Service already has websites, archives, museums, historical records. The people who placed those panels inside the mountain knew contemporary Americans did not need a titanium box to explain Mount Rushmore. The box was for someone else, someone far away in time. Imagine the United States no longer exists. Imagine today's cities are archaeological ruins. Our digital records are unreadable. Languages have evolved beyond recognition. And somewhere in the Black Hills, 4 enormous faces remain. Wind has damaged them. Rain has worn the granite. Trees have moved closer. Roads have disappeared. Then explorers find a canyon behind the faces. They climb into the mountain. They discover a black granite capstone. Beneath it, a sealed titanium vault. They open it, and suddenly, voices from our civilization speak again. That was Borglum's idea. Not just a monument, a time capsule on a monumental scale. And from that perspective, the Hall of Records may be one of the strangest parts of Mount Rushmore. The faces were created to be seen. The records were created to wait, perhaps for centuries, perhaps for millennia, maybe until every person who knows what Mount Rushmore means is gone. So, is there really a secret chamber at Mount Rushmore? Yes, there is a real chamber most visitors will never enter, but calling its existence a government secret is inaccurate. Its history is publicly documented. Was its construction stopped by Congress? Yes, but the surviving records indicate funding was redirected toward finishing the presidential sculpture. Not that workers had discovered something forbidden inside the mountain. Is something sealed there today? Yes, a repository containing 16 porcelain enamel panels sits protected inside a teakwood box and titanium vault beneath a granite capstone. Are there verified secret tunnels, classified archives, military command rooms, or hidden government facilities extending beneath the monument? There is currently no credible public evidence proving any of those claims. And strangely, the truth may be more memorable without them, because nearly a century ago, a sculptor looked at a mountain and worried that one day civilization might forget what it meant. So he decided the monument needed a message. He tried to carve a giant room into the mountain. Congress stopped the work. He died before the plan could be completed. The tunnel sat unfinished for decades. Then, 57 years after construction had ended, a small group returned. They carried records into the canyon, placed them inside titanium, covered them with granite, and left them there, waiting for a future audience. maybe thousands of years away. So the next time you see a photograph of Mount Rushmore, don't only look at the faces. Remember what the camera doesn't show. Behind them, inside the granite, is a dark, unfinished passage, and buried there is a message from the 20th century, waiting for people who may not be born for another 1,000 years. Now, we want to know what you think. Is the official explanation of the Hall of Records enough for you? Or do you believe there could still be parts of Mount Rushmore's story that have never been made public? Write your theory in the comments. And if you made it this far, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We have more documentaries investigating hidden chambers, abandoned government projects, strange historical mysteries, and places most people are never allowed to enter. And when this video ends, check out the other documentaries on the channel, because sometimes the most mysterious places aren't hidden on classified maps. Sometimes they're standing in front of millions of tourists, while the real story is carved into the other side. One final thought. Borglum feared that someday people would see Mount Rushmore, but have no idea who built it, why it existed, or what civilization created it. That's why the Hall of Records was conceived. A message to the future. The presidents face outward toward the world, but the chamber behind them faces something else entirely. Time. And for now, it remains closed, silent, and waiting.